Great. Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here at this conference, and I really want to thank you, Michael, and thanks, Stephen, for all of the work that you do for getting the real truth about health out to the people. This is my third year at this conference, and I wish we were in the room together. Really, really wish we were, but I just want to put out appreciation for all of the speakers and all of you here today. I think many of us, maybe all of us, are on a path of understanding that the real truth about health is that if we change our diets, we can reclaim our health and change our lives. And I think it's also true that if we change our food system, we can reclaim planetary health and change the future for the health of our children. So that's what I want to talk with you about today. Is the desperate need to shift for so many reasons to decentralize, de-escalate our food system that's currently addicted to pesticides to grow industrial commodity crops that are largely not feeding people. And what are the barriers to changing this? So I want to talk about some of the old systems and patterns and ways of behaving that we see when we dig through the documents of the world's largest pesticide companies. So I want to talk with you today on two levels, both the personal health, what we can do to reclaim our own health, and the systemic level of food system. How can we act to reclaim our food system, and what's getting in the way of that? So I'm going to be speaking today specifically about disinformation and how companies engage in a very wide-ranging, very aggressive tactics to control the narrative about our food system. And I think these details are important to understand. And I have lots of details to share coming straight from Monsanto and Allies' very own documents. So in their own words, their own documents, the secrets of how they run their disinformation playbook. And I think it's important to understand both to see what we're up against in terms of systemic entrenchment, and also all of the many ways that companies, other entities too, but I don't think we talk enough about how corporations do that, about how they use all of the channels of communication and influence to surround us with truths that aren't true. That we need pesticides to feed the world, that pesticides are safe, that there's no choice but to continue on with this system. So shining a light on all that so we can see it more clearly, so that we can also find strategies ourselves to break through the disinformation that's coming at us from all angles. So we're really going to break it down today about how they do it, the many, many tricks. And it's astonishing, even for those of us who have been on the receiving end of it, many people who speak on behalf of a healthier food system, who raise concerns about pesticides or factory farming, industrial food, have been targets of these disinformation campaigns. So some of this will feel familiar to you. And I think on the whole, it's very surprising, the extent to which they must go, which in a way is good news, because it really takes a lot of disinformation and deliberate effort at narrative control to keep these systems going. And before I jump into my slideshow, I want to say also just one more thing about systems and institutions. I want to keep the focus on that level, because I don't believe this is a story about us versus them, or people on the good side versus people on the bad side. I think that we are in a time when some of us see, and many of us don't yet see, that the institutions that are failing us, and failing us on all levels, failing to protect life and honor life, and failing even to allow for a future at this current point. But they're just human agreements. And we are free at any time to make different decisions and different agreements to create new institutions and systems that respect and value life. So I think many of us here today are on the path of wanting to understand how to do that, and that it's important also to see clearly first what we're up against. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here and jump into my slideshow. Okay. So here we go. So I'm going to be talking today about Merchants of Poison. This is a report that I published in December, and a huge shout out to my wonderful co-authors, Kendra Klein from Friends of the Earth. She's a senior scientist there, and Anna LePay from Real Food Media. We worked on this report for many years, and it comes from, as this image portrays, straight from the documents of Monsanto and the pesticide companies. And we had so many documents, such a wealth of material to work from, to read, to understand, to try to explain what do these documents tell us about the playbook of how pesticide companies control the narrative about our food system. So that's the big picture that I'll get into, but I want to start with telling you why I got interested in this topic. And that goes back to 2012. And this is a graph, the horrible little graph. If any of you were around, this is 2012. 2012, California was the first state to put to voters a question: should we label genetically engineered foods? So prior to that, in the United States, there wasn't a lot of talk or press or concern rising to the forefront about GMOs. They were very controversial in Europe, tons of press coverage, protests, consumer groups working on campaigns against GMOs in Europe, and required labeling. So companies were already labeling for Europe. They largely weren't selling GMO foods in Europe. But here in the United States, between the mid-90s and the mid-2000s, our food system proliferated with GMOs, corn and soy, primarily. Just infiltrated our food system totally, and there was very little conversation about it. But when you ask people, did they want these food labeled, the overwhelming answer was yes. So this is a graph that was done by Pepperdine University. They tracked the ballot initiatives in California all through the year. So this graph started in July and went through, it stopped actually just before Election Day. So what happened here? Well, you can see that more than 60%, 65, even 70% of people, the green line, agreed that yes, we should label genetically engineered foods. And that's a huge level of support. And this was bipartisan support: Republicans, Democrats, all demographics, high support for labeling GMOs. And then you see, if there was an exact date on this graph, you would see that the downturn starts on October 1st, 2012, and public support takes a steep dive off a cliff, basically. Now, that was the day that Monsanto and other pesticide and food companies started to spend their war chest to defeat this labeling campaign. They raised $46 million. So this was about $1 million a day in very intense blizzard of disinformation, lies, confusion, just blanketed the state. And it was very intense. It was like every other radio commercial, TV commercials, flyers to everybody's home, billboards, just full court press, confusion, and scaremongering about a label. Unfortunately, it worked. And one of the depressing things about this campaign, and any political campaign, many people are making their decisions about how to vote based on what they see on TV. So many people just abandoned their desire to see this food labeling, and you can see the lines crossed, and we lost the election. There's more to the story of this graph, which I'll tell at the end, which was a positive and surprising part of the story about how we rallied back, and we actually won the vote on Election Day, but had lost too much in the early days to make up for it. So this happened, the month of October 2012 was a terrible, dark time. And we wanted to know, how did they do that? How does this system work? What's going on behind the scenes? Because one of the astonishing things was that it was so many different kinds of people, professors, lawyers, Nobel laureate scientists, influencers of all kinds that were suddenly marching to the tune of Monsanto's choir. We knew that the talking points were coming straight from the corporate-funded No campaign, and the speakers of the talking points, seemingly disconnected from the companies, were just singing to the tune as a choir. So we really wanted to understand, how does that messaging work? How does the influence flow work? How does the money work? So we decided to investigate this. And my colleague at the Prop 37 campaign, Gary Ruskin, he was the campaign manager and I was the media director of that campaign. We decided to launch US Right to Know and to start investigating this question. How did they do it? So Gary, a brilliant public researcher, he'd worked for 30 years with Ralph Nader on an organization called Commercial Alert, and used, the old tried and true sort of shoe leather research investigation techniques, which involved largely public records requests that we filed all over the place, public universities, governments, other entities that are public, and also eventually worked with whistleblowers and other sorts of just research and reporting to try to get at the answer to this question. How do they do it? And so we've written lots of articles, reporting at usrtk.org, fact sheets on front groups. We just have a huge wealth of information there about the different elements that are in play with these disinformation campaigns for both the pesticide industry and also the ultra-processed food industry. We've done a ton of work also trying to get at their documents and glean what they can tell us about how much control processed food companies, Coca-Cola and the junk food companies have over public health spaces, public health groups, professional groups, dietitians, et cetera. So I really encourage folks to check out our website at usrtk.org. Gary has now co-authored 15 academic studies that discuss these documents and lessons that we've learned from them.